It was May 13th, 2014. Students and teachers were excited to go on their last dive of the semester, a routine dip off the coast of Vancouver Island. But what started as a survey of the local waters turned into a mystery beyond imagination. What this group of young biologists found was beyond all expectations, and they certainly got their university's credits worth that year, when an old camera was rummaged off the sea floor. Strap on your scuba gear because we're uncovering the mysteries of this camera and the pictures that were still inside. When the students of the Bamfield Marine Sciences Centre in Canada went out for a routine dive on that fateful day in May, they got way more than they bargained for. Sure, they had completed their $400 certifications and were well trained in all things scuba, but this was supposed to be a boring, end-of-the-semester, dull-as-dishwater dive. They were assigned by their professors to collect data on starfish by taking count of every single one of those 5-fingered echinodermata that they came across. Now, you may be thinking this was a poor use of their $1,000 per semester tuition, but it's not a bad deal when you compare it to the, $50,000 plus a year it costs to go to college in the United States. But what made this day go from run-of-the-mill to running to the press was when Tella Osler and Bo Doherty noticed a shiny object on the bottom of the sea floor. They rushed to see what this strange flicker of light could be. After all, there's always a chance that it could be buried treasure. Hey, shipwrecks are still out there, people. In fact, salvagers found a 300-year-old ship lying at the bottom of the Caribbean only a few years ago, and it just so happened to be a vessel known as the legendary San Jose, containing treasure that amounted to $17 billion. Yeah, we'd say anytime you come across a shiny object underwater, it's in your best interest to see if it's a long-lost ship. You may become the world's next billionaire. And you wouldn't be the first person to think the route of underwater metal detection is your way out of the poorhouse. Of course, the underwater metal detectors can cost you a pretty penny. The Garrett AT Pro is one of the best on the market and is submersible up to 10 feet, which means it's ideal for snorkeling along the shore and detecting some of that pirate gold that got knocked out of its chest. This detector will run you $550, so it's a bit of an investment, but it could absolutely be worth it. But if you know you're diving, like our adventurous group of students here, you might want to look into picking up the Garrett Sea Hunter MK2. If Tella and Bo had this bad boy, they would have found that camera in a heartbeat. This incredible device can detect metal up to 200 feet underwater, and even includes waterproof headphones so you can hear all the majesty the ocean has to offer. But again, this one too is gonna cost you. Better start saving because this piece of equipment starts at $764. And if you add that to the $975 price tag of your standard scuba equipment, you better cross your fingers that you come across the next long-lost sunken treasure soon, or you've invested in an incredibly expensive hobby. But Tella and Bo used their keen eyes and diving skills to find out just what that shimmer was, and what they actually found when they dove down to grab that glimmery light was much more special than they could have imagined, and sent them and their entire class on a journey they couldn't believe. The object in question was a camera, partially covered in sand, 40 feet below the surface, and absolutely covered with algae and barnacles. This was certainly an old camera. From the looks of it, many students believed it was some sort of pirate ship movie prop, and the first thought on everyone's mind was, could the pictures taken on this unique find be recovered? And to take it a step further, could this camera be returned to its owner, and would there possibly be a reward? But first things first, the crew of students and teachers had to return to shore and get this strange find back to the lab. And things weren't looking good as far as getting pictures out of it. First off, the camera looked to be about from 2012, which would only pocket about $100 to $200 if sold at face value, and it also meant that their find was about 2 years old. Had it been sitting at the bottom of the ocean for all that time? Could there even be a chance of it working again? Well, only time would tell. And after opening up the back panel, oh boy, did things really start to look like nothing was going to be retrieved off this thing. See, inside of the camera there were a plethora of sea creatures that had moved in and decided to make this lost long time capsule their home. A sea cucumber, some more starfish, and even phyla were all residing inside, but they had not damaged the memory card. The memory card was nothing special, a $10 SD card called Lexar Platinum 2, and it had 8 gigabits of space on it. But after being cleaned up a bit and popped into a computer, the biology department was amazed to see it still worked. Yeah, you heard that right. After all this time, being sunk at the bottom of the sea, and more impressive than that, after sharing a home with a few friendly sea critters, this little piece of electronic wonderment still worked. Take that, all you new-aged 1 terabyte $6,000 SD cards out there. This little guy was worth only $10 and it still worked like a dream. Tons of photos of people no one knew were all standing together, smiling, looking like it was some sort of family gathering. With how small the local town of Brimfield was, we're talking like 3,500 total residents. The students realized there was a very good chance of someone recognizing these pictures, and who knows, maybe somebody would offer them a reward. Would it be as much as a sunken ship that housed 17 billion? Well, no, they knew that, but someone out there would be willing to pay to get their long-lost camera back, right? Through the magic of social media, the pictures were uploaded for all to see and tagged properly to get maximum exposure. But sadly, no one knew who the photos were of. No matter who was asked, whether they had lived in the town their whole lives or just a student attending the school for the duration of the semester, no one had seen or heard of anyone that was in these pictures. So the mystery continued. But that didn't stop the hunt for the owner of this camera. Siobhan Gray, who was a teacher of the students, decided enough was enough and made old-fashioned posters and hung them around town. Archaic, maybe, but did it work? Believe it or not, it did. A local taxi driver had spotted the posters and thought that he had recognized someone in the picture and brought this information straight to Professor Gray. He said he believed one of the men was in a horrible shipwreck a few years back, and his boat had sunk. Gray knew what she had to do. There was only one place they would have a record of a shipwreck, and that would be the Coast Guard. And it worked! The Coast Guard did indeed remember the wreck and had the name and number of the man who lost his ship a few years back. Gray knew this was her chance. It was time to call the man and ask if it was his camera. Paul Burgoyne was his name. He was an artist from Vancouver, and when he heard that someone had found a sunken camera containing pictures of him and his family, he just about flipped out. Never in a million years did he think he would see this camera again. After all, a shipwreck is nothing to sneeze at, and it was a devastating loss. Paul's wife was the same way. After hearing that their camera had been retrieved, she couldn't believe it and started jumping for joy just like her husband. It was incredible. All the pieces fit. This truly was Paul's camera, and the infamous shipwreck, it had indeed happened 2 years prior. Paul had set out to sail on his 30-foot boat, likely valued around $10,000, to journey from Vancouver to Tassis in British Columbia. Nothing dangerous about the route, and when asked about the weather, Paul said it was clear skies, nothing to worry about, and he was looking forward to a relaxing journey. But within minutes, everything changed. The sky darkened, the winds picked up, and Paul found himself diving straight through harsh waters. The boat crashed right into some hidden rocks, and Paul was left with only one choice: swim out to some nearby large rocks and hope that someone would find him. Luckily for him, someone did. Paul was stranded on the rocks for 6 hours, but he didn't give up hope. Paul knew that he only had a limited time for someone to find him as the temperature was dropping and he was in no position to stay out in this weather any longer. Paul decided the best bet was to continue to call out for help, no matter how hopeless it may have seemed, and however quiet his yells may have been in comparison to the howling winds of the storm. But his tenacity paid off. Tourists at a nearby inn had wandered to a nearby cliff and heard his shouting coming from down below. Paul was saved, and good thing too. He very likely would have gotten hypothermia if he was out there any longer. So the mystery had finally been solved. Paul was indeed the shipwreck survivor, and his camera had been thrown from his boat and sunken right to the sea floor. Turns out, though Paul didn't offer the students any kind of reward, much to the chagrin of the students of course, the contents of the photos were absolutely priceless to Paul and his family, and for good reason. They contained the only photos taken from when he and his family had scattered the ashes of his mother. They were literally the only memories left in existence of that day.
We spread my mom and dad's ashes in Lake of the Woods, Ontario, and that was a group of family photos from that event.
No one else had any physical record of this important time in Paul and his family's life. Paul was quoted as saying, "We were surprised but really appreciated the people who went to the extent to find me and return our photos." So, what would you say is the most amazing part of this tale? Well, I'd have to go with the fact that this small $10 8GB memory card still worked after all this time. I didn't really give enough credit to how amazing technology is. After all, these electronics are durable, and good thing too, because you never know when you may be out on your 45-foot, $100,000 yacht when suddenly the winds shift and you find yourself stranded on a bunch of rocks while your camera sinks to the bottom of the ocean. Wow, what a story. After all, Paul was lucky enough just to have survived his ordeal. Just goes to show if you happen to see something shiny at the bottom of the ocean, it's really worth it to go down and grab it. It may contain one man's priceless photos that act as his personal time capsule, or hey, you could be really lucky and find the remains of a real sunken treasure worth $17 billion. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, thanks so much for checking out The Richest. See you next time and have a great day.